Let yourself sink without hurry. Imagine the world narrowing to blue, then to ink, then to a velvet blacking out that is not empty, just quiet. The surface fades like a memory you meant to keep, but didn't need. There are no waves here, not really, only the soft movement of a planet breathing through water. The temperature falls to a careful chill. The sunlight bows out. And the ocean, the patient ocean, begins to show you the places where humans are more rumor than presence. We are descending to a place shaped by two tectonic plates that met and decided to fold. The Pacific plate dives under the Philippine Sea plate, and as it bends, it carves the deepest groove on Earth, the Mariana Trench. If you laid Everest inside it, the mountain would disappear under the dark. At its deepest measured point, Challenger Deep, the water column presses with a weight that is difficult to feel through numbers. 1,000 times the pressure you know at the shore. Steel groans. Rubber stiffens. And yet, life. That is the soft astonishment that meets you down here. At 11 kilometers, the ocean doesn't choose to be empty. It simply becomes selective. There is no sun to write energy into food. There is no warmth to speed molecules into a rush. What trickles down bits of dead plankton and mixed fragments called marine snow, occasional falls of wood or whales, chemical whispers from far-off volcanic vents, becomes currency. Food is a slow rain, and survival is a long conversation, not a fight. The question we carry into this hush is simple, and it feels like opening a door very gently. Who lives here? Who makes a home where pressure turns water into a denser version of itself, where calcium shells dissolve and gas bubbles cannot be trusted? Who wears the dark, not as a burden, but as a kind of skin? First, you might notice movement without light, just disturbances, as if the water itself were thinking. A drifting veil, the fragile architecture of a jelly that never had any use for sunlight's colors, only for the choreography of tentacles. A whisper of amphipods, delicate crustaceans, no bigger than your thumb, propelled like commas through a sentence you haven't finished reading. The seafloor, when it finally appears, is fine as sifted flour. And on that plain, like lanterns that forgot their flame, there are bodies without pigment, translucent skins, pale eyes that don't need eyes. Strangeness has a different texture in this place. It isn't the exotic for its own sake. It is usefulness. Skeletons soften to avoid shattering under pressure. Proteins wear special locks against being pried apart by the crush. Muscles trade speed for endurance. Life lets go of what it doesn't need. What remains is elegant and almost austere. There are, in this trench, creatures that feel like ideas made visible. Single cells the size of a human hand, building houses from grains of sediment. Fish that look like soft question marks, transparent as frost, living deeper than any other fish has been measured. Sea cucumbers that appear as walking glass, reworking the seafloor, one careful mouthful at a time. Anemones blooming from bare rock where nothing is supposed to take root. And small, relentless crustaceans inventing chemical tricks to keep their bodies from dissolving. They are the strangest residents only because we are used to another neighborhood. Here, their choices make perfect sense. Let your breath find a slower cadence. Let the mind grow wide. We will meet them one by one, listening for the small sounds of their lives, how they feed, how they move, what their existence says about ours. The deep does not rush, and neither will we. Just ahead, a ghostly fish drifts across our path, its fins like the hems of a silk dress in water that cannot carry color. It is the deepest living fish known to science, and somehow it looks as fragile as a lullaby. How does such a delicate body withstand 1,000 atmospheres of pressure? The answer is less a secret than a poem written in chemistry. And it begins with salt. The deep is patient with our curiosity. It waits as we puzzle things out, as we rebuild what we can never fully inhabit. The first human witnesses of the trench brought eyes more used to daylight. In 1960, when the bathyscaphe Trieste touched the floor of Challenger Deep, the view was short silt kicked into suspension, a few shapes half glimpsed. One of those shapes was described as a flatfish slipping away. Later, scientists would wonder if it had been a misunderstanding, a different animal, or just the way sediment can pretend to be alive when you want it to be. Belief is slippery in a place where everything moves slowly and nothing invites attention. Decades later, cameras grew patient enough to linger, and our ears learned to listen to the quiet. James Cameron dropped to the same depth in 2012 and found not a parade of monsters, but a simplicity. A solitary sea cucumber, elegant in its inefficiency. Amphipods flickering in the lens like ideas. Fine sediment that rose in clouds, then settled back like snow, being taught how to sleep. The deep does not perform. It presents. In the midwater over the trench, thousands of meters of water that might be mistaken for empty. There are small lanterns and slow ballets. A hydromedusa crosses the frame, a jelly with a bell that seems made of glass. Each canal a blood-red line that the deep quickly edits to black, because red light doesn't travel here. Its tentacles hang like tassels from an underwater chandelier. It pulses not with urgency, but with a confidence born of having nowhere else to go, and no need to go there fast. Around it, there may be Xenophyophores, comb jellies, whose cilia would scatter rainbow under sunlight, but here simply move in unison, combs brushing water the way a hand might soothe hair. Even the silence is not really silence. Clicks of shrimp. A thread of bioluminescent alarm when something passes by. The quietest crackle of tiny skeletons settling. Sound travels far in the deep. It's a shared language. Down toward the seafloor, things become stranger by becoming more themselves. The sediment is a record of ruin and renewal, a fine memory of what fell from above. Diatom shells, bits of algae, shards of life. In that patient library, there are builders. Giant single-celled organisms, Xenophyophores, spread themselves like lace across the ground, gathering grains, gluing them with organic glue, fashioning shelters that are both body and home. Each is one cell, one, a living architecture large enough to hold your hand. If you think of cells as tiny, chaotic factories, these are more like monasteries. Inside, the cytoplasm flows slowly along a maze of tubes. Outside, the test the mineral house acts as both protection and a net catching meals. Not fast creatures, not loud ones. But somehow, out of the constraint of a single cell, they make complexity. Some strange beings do not rise or drift, they anchor. On bare rock slopes and in soft mud, pale anemones open and close, their bodies like milk glass, their tentacles counting invisible currents. They hold by a pedal disc or by digging a slender column into sediment that looks as if it should swallow anything that tries to stand. They are proof that even in a place where calcium shells are discouraged by chemistry and depth, some designs remain durable. A circle of arms around a patient mouth, a flower that does not need sunshine. And then there is the fish we hinted at. Imagine a tadpole drawn by a gentle hand. The body almost gelatin, the head broad, the fins thin as whispers. It is a snailfish, a member of a family that learned to trade hardness for flexibility. In the Mariana Trench, scientists filmed these fish gliding at depths greater than 6,000 meters, and later identified a species, Pseudolaparus swirei, dwelling between about 7 and 8 kilometers down, transparent skull and all. It is not the only snailfish of the Hadal trenches, but it is the one that tells us a story about limits, about how to live where the pressure wants to unmate you. What looks fragile is often a negotiation. The snailfish's bones are not fully ossified, a kindness to avoid the brittleness that pressure punishes. It carries no gas-filled swim bladder that would be crushed to betrayal. Instead, it floats through adaptations as soft as its silhouette. Inside its cells, molecules called osmolytes, especially one with a bright, briny name, trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMA, help proteins keep their shape under stress. With depth, the concentration of TMAO rises. At some point, scientists think the cost becomes too great. The chemistry suggests a depth limit beyond which fish cannot balance the equation. The Mariana snailfish swims very near that boundary, as if breathing on glass and writing a signature. Down here, you can see mouths without malice. A snailfish will hover over a patch of mud and open its mouth to drink amphipods from the water as if it were sipping seeds. An amphipod will scavenge a fallen scrap with a patience that makes time expand. An anemone will just wait, until enough is carried past to make a life. Strange becomes a word for perfectly adapted. We have just begun meeting them. Ahead is a creature that quietly solved the chemistry problem, the way a watchmaker solves friction, with a clever coating. It wears its home like a secret. It is small, common, unassuming, and it thrives even at the trench's floor. You might miss it, unless you listen close to the whisper of tiny legs. Think of a comma that swims, a silvered sliver with long antennae feeling the dark. The amphipod is one of the trench's reliable presences, a little cleaner and recycler, a tender of the deep's housekeeping. Some amphipods here are the usual size of small crustaceans. Others elsewhere in the Hadal world grow into giants by comparison, hands-long behemoths drifting like leaves. In the Mariana Trench, one of the most common denizens is Hirondalia gigas, a species that has learned at least 2 remarkable tricks to make the deep work for it. First, food. At these depths, a woodfall is a feast. Logs lost from rivers, driftwood, or debris from storms after long travels can eventually sink and come to rest even in trenches. Hirondalia gigas carries enzymes that help it digest tough plant material cellulases, like little keys that unlock what would otherwise be locked. It can turn a soaked plank into energy in a place where energy is slow to come by. When there's no wood, it scavenges what the ocean offers: jelly, fish, delicate flakes of marine snow, recycling life into life. Second, armor, but not the kind you might expect. Calcium carbonate, so useful for shells in the shallows, becomes unstable in the cold. High pressure, slightly acidic chemistry of the Hadal Sea. Many deep animals simply do without, trading calcified shields for chitin and softness. Hirondalia gigas does something different. It takes aluminum from the sediment, pulling it out with organic compounds in its gut, and somehow coaxes that metal into a delicate layer of aluminum hydroxide on its exoskeleton. Not heavy armor, just a thin, watery gel that seems to help fortify the body's surface in conditions that would otherwise gnaw at it. It is like wearing dew that defends. A chemical raincoat. There is humility in this solution, no iron plates, no dramatic spikes. just the right detail in the right place. When scientists began to examine amphipods from the deepest trenches a few years ago, they found a sorrow quietly folded into the data. Even here, the bodies of small crustaceans carried fragments of microplastic, fibers and films that had fallen from our world of synthetic ease into the patient conveyor of the sea. Molecules we made, molecules the amphipods did not ask for. There were also traces of old industrial chemicals, persistent compounds that, once poured, became travelers. It is not a sharp tragedy, not an easy story, and not a reason to despair. It is a thread linking us to them, a reminder that the oceans are one body of water. The amphipod goes on, because life tends to. But we can listen to what its body quietly says. The snailfish swims by like a thought. If you could touch it, though, you wouldn't. It might feel like a bag of water with a direction, more a gesture than a chassis. That softness is a strategy. Bones are light, collagen is generous, muscles are tuned to long, unhurried movements. The fish's skin is bare of scales, a smooth membrane that does not bother with decoration. Its eyes, in the deepest species, are not especially prominent. In the permanent midnight of the trench, vision is not a priority. Instead, the lateral line, a sensory organ that reads pressure waves, becomes a kind of touch at a distance. The fish feels what moves nearby. It reads water as we read wind across the skin. Science gives this ghost a name and a map. Pseudoleparus soiree, described in 2017 after years of expeditions sending cameras and traps to the trench's slopes and valleys. Specimens were gently coaxed to the surface from depths near 8,000 meters, their bodies glittering with the shock of coming home to low pressure. From them, measurements and surprises. Skulls so translucent you could trace their shapes against the day. Gills with adaptations tuned to oxygen's slender presence down deep. Eggs that were few and large, an investment, not a gamble. There is evidence that snailfishes in different trenches lay their eggs in sheltered places, crevices, under overhangs, sometimes leaving them in clusters to develop in slow peace. We do not know all of the details for every species. This is a quiet family. But the pattern suggests care arranged not in bright gestures, but in private architecture. Why is there a limit to fish when amphipods descend to the very bottom? Chemistry whispers its reasoning. Proteins, those folding machines that do almost everything in a cell, can be forced open by pressure. Osmolytes like TMAO counter that force. The deeper you go, the more you need. But osmolytes also change the cell's water balance, its saltiness, its cost of living. At some point, the curve bends too far. Models and measurements suggest that snailfish are near that curve's edge. Perhaps slightly deeper fish may exist in other trenches, as cameras have briefly glimpsed in the Hadal world. But the edge of possibility is not a razor. It's a soft boundary where life tests, adapts, and then chooses a niche. Back on the seafloor, an animal that looks like melted glass moves slowly over the silt. A holothurian, a sea cucumber, neither vegetable nor a sandwich joke, but an echinoderm, cousin to sea urchins and stars. In the Hadal depths, some sea cucumbers are nearly transparent, their innards visible as pale riverbeds within. They inflate and deflate gentle tube feet. They lift their front ends and sift, scooping the thin layer of organic-rich sediment into mouths designed not to hurry. They are walking composters, taking the loose income of the deep and turning it into stable currency. Each pass cleans a strip of floor. Each day, the trench is quietly tended. The strangeness of the trench is that so many of its animals are not grotesque caricatures of adaptation, but elegant essays in gentleness. There are polychaete worms with hair-like bristles that do not rush, brittle stars that hold up their arms as if asking the darkness a question, anemones that bloom without sunlight, because blooming is a way of being more than a way of feeding. There is patience woven into flesh, and there is architecture made by a single cell. We have met the Xenophyophore briefly. Now, let's stay with it a little longer, because it may be the strangest creature you can hold in one gaze without breaking it into parts. It is a self whose house is its outline. It draws in tiny grains, glues them, extends a labyrinth within. It lives not by chasing, but by sifting, by letting the ocean bring what it brings. In its very slowness is a kind of grace. Just beyond this quiet garden, the trench's slopes dim into midwater again, into that vast space where everything is diluted, where a body becomes a signal more than a shape. In that space, there are communities we haven't even seen yet, lights that turn on when touched, transparent hunters that move like ideas. The deep keeps secrets kindly. In the next breath, we'll follow the places where the trench leans toward heat, where geology pinches and chemistry invents a new way to feed. Not at the absolute bottom, but within the trench's long shadow, lie vents and springs that rewrite the rules. Their citizens are strange with a different flavor, and they glow without light. The trench itself is a gravity of dark and pressure, but to its west runs a line of volcanoes and seafloor fractures, Mariana Arc and Back Arc, where the earth trades whispers with the ocean. Not all of these places are Hadal deep, but they belong to the same neighborhood of wonder. They exhale heat and chemistry. Water heated beneath the crust by magma and minerals escapes in black plumes as hot as a kill, or in shimmering, clear streaks, or even as droplets of liquid carbon dioxide, a heavy champagne of the deep. In one place along the arc, sulfur pools like a melted coin, yellow and molten in a crater where the water shivers with heat. It is a theater that would frighten us if we were not careful. For the animals that live here, it is simply dinner. At vents, the sun's absence is not a problem, because bacteria catch energy not from light, but from chemicals hydrogen sulfide, methane, reduced metals. They oxidize these, and in doing so, write sugar out of stone. On their backs, everything climbs. Shrimp with eyes that are not eyes hover near the heat, their bodies flushed with color they cannot see. Snails wear armor not of chalk, but of iron sulfide, or, in other neighborhoods, scales of unique design. Limpets and mussels open their doors to symbiotic bacteria in their gills, hosting gardens within. Squat lobsters form shaggy beards of filamentous microbes and harvest them like a careful farmer. Worms plume red hems, setting gills in a current that would cook our skin, but warms their economy. These are not the trench's Hadal residents, exactly. They are the trench-adjacent choir, the regional dialect of strangeness that says life doesn't need sunlight to sing. Just a little farther from those extremes, on the fringe slopes that dip toward the trench, the floor becomes a mosaic of quiet feats. Sponges like pail barrels sift gallons of water through holes that look like nothing. Stalked crinoids sea lily raise fronged arms and comb for particles that feel remote to us, but are their daily bread. Delicate corals, some with skeletons of protein instead of stone, form groves that will never see green, but still are forests, in the ways that matter for shelter and flow. In the Hadal domain proper, the architecture is low, not reaching upward, but refining the ground itself. A field of Xenophyophores, can turn a plane into a neighborhood. Their tests, those mineral houses catch organic bits and slow currents, creating microhabitats where other small creatures take refuge, forage, or hide eggs. Think of them as living reefs written in lowercase. Their sheer presence changes the shape of the seafloor's life. A single cell becomes an engineer. Sea anemones take on a different poise here. Some stand up from rock like a candle, their tentacles points of patient reach. Others slip their bodies down into mud and present only a crown of waiting arms. In the trench, a few have been recorded standing improbably alone on bare rock walls, not in gardens as in shallow seas, but in sparse galleries where each blooms a statement, "This place is enough." In the cold and pressure, a mouth can make do with what arrives. Predation is not a chase. It is a readiness. We often imagine the deep as a place devoid of color, yet life carries color even in darkness for reasons other than sight. Jellies that drift above the trench may be milky or glass clear, but inside their bodies, fluorescent proteins hum with potential, responsive to touches of certain wavelengths. In pockets of the midwater, creatures produce their own glow bioluminescence as a language. Come closer, stay away. I am here. Red, invisible here, is a frequent choice of pigmentation. Being red is a way to be black, to disappear. The hydromedusa with blood-colored canals that NOAA cameras filmed above the trench was likely not signaling. It was simply itself. Color is a relic, a function, a shield, a memory. In this place, locomotion is a conversation with drag and thrift. Many bodies are soft, not to be weak, but to be adjustable. Amphipods pump their paddles in bursts, hover, and then rest. Snailfish undulate like a ribbon, turning minimal muscle into maximum glide. Sea cucumbers inch through the sediment with a patience that isn't a compromise, it's a budget. Most deep residents spend their lives in energy accounting, where the generous bloom is not brightness, but consistency. And yet, across all this slowness, everything is connected. When a whale falls, if one should tumble this far, the trench stirs as if a rainstorm came. Scavengers congregate with an efficiency that would astonish us if we could see the calendar they keep. Bacteria set to their chemistry. Worms arrive that specialize in dissolving bone, their symbionts turning collagen into sugar. Over months to years, the fall becomes community, then memory, then silt. When a storm far above sweeps the surface ocean into froth, tiny echoes find their way down in altered patterns of marine snow. The trench listens always and replies by continuing. The word strange begins to lose its edge down here. Everything feels less like exception and more like a version of necessity. Evolution in the Hadal zone has fewer ways to show off. Instead, it refines, repeating shapes that work, inventing small genius, the Amphipod's aluminum gel, the snailfish's TMA balance, the Xenophyophores' architectural cell. As we rest in this understanding, a slender figure rises from the slope, holding itself as if balancing on its own grace. It is a sea anemone again, or perhaps a stalked jelly in a pose that mimics a temptation to categorize misplaced by the deep's variety. The camera angle shifts. The creature pulses very slowly and closes as if returning a question to the one who asked it. In a moment, we'll draw the light of our attention back across everything we've met. The ghostly fish, the single cells with houses, the recyclers, the blooms without sun. We'll ask what their existence says about ours. What is pressure, after all, except a condition to negotiate? Their negotiations are instructive. They are also beautiful. Imagine now rising a little not to the surface, not yet, but to a place where the trench's slopes relax into open dark. The journey is a meditation on small victories. Each creature here is an equation solved not once, but through generations of trial, each adjustment bought and kept because it worked. The strangeness we came for turns out to be a kind of wisdom. The Hadal snailfish is a teacher in its softness. It asks us to stop equating strength with hardness. The structures that endure pressure best are often those that yield. In engineering, this is obvious. In living, we forget. The snailfish's bones are light. Its body is a bag of water shaped by will and habit. Its proteins are protected not by walls, but by compatible partners, osmolytes, that hold them where they need to be. Its limit is not a failure. It is an honest boundary set by physics and chemistry, approached and respected. We, too, have limits. There is grace in knowing them and in finding the edges we can live near without breaking. The amphipod's small body carries a different lesson. In a place where a shell would dissolve, it finds a way to borrow from the earth, a touch of aluminum coaxed into a skin. It eats what the forest of the sea sends down. It wears our plastics too, not by choice. That is the part of the story written by us, and it softens the tone of wonder with responsibility. Even at the deepest point on earth, there are fingerprints. This doesn't diminish the creatures. They are as clever and as resilient as ever. It simply includes us in the picture. We are not above or apart. The trench is not a remote vault. The ocean is one water, moving, linking, mixing. To care for the near is to care for the far. The Xenophyophore, single-celled giant, demonstrates that complexity is not about how many parts you have, but how you arrange what you do. One cell, a house, a neighborhood, a habitat for others. No rush. It turns sediment and patience into impact. Think about that when the world asks you to multiply your pieces. Sometimes the secret is not more, but better placed. Sea cucumbers, anemones, jellies, these do not stride. They inhabit. They are fluent in the verb to be. They take the dimmest currents and make meals. They take the quietest roads to next week. Their stillness is not absence of action. It is a strategy. There is a shape of life that looks like calm from the outside and feels like endurance from the inside. Perhaps that is what rest is, when practiced well. What does it mean that life fills even the trench? It means that the universe is more permissive than we often assume. That chemistry's possibilities arrive early and go deep. That once metabolism is lit, it can burn on far from the matches we know: sunlight, air, grassy fields. In the trench, the energy trickles, and yet it is enough to weave beings. On vent fields nearby, energy comes like a storm, and yet communities assemble quickly to handle the surge. Variety is not simply decoration. It is insurance. It is grace. We could make a list of everything we don't know. It would be longer than this script. The deep still keeps its secrets kindly. Behaviors never filmed because the cameras haven't waited long enough. Species that exist only as glimpses. Microbial worlds drafting geochemical novels we haven't learned to read. But we know enough to feel tenderness. The Mariana Trench does not intimidate when you sit with it softly. It reassures. If life can manage here, it can manage in many places. If cells can hold their shapes under this much press, perhaps we too can hold our shapes under the weight we carry. When we finally ascended our minds, letting the pressure lighten, we can bring something up with us that won't pop in air. A sense that strangeness is often a mirror angled differently, that patience is a survival skill, that simplicity can be deliberate, that even our smallest choices slide down the water column and become part of someone else's weather. If you listen, you can still hear the amphipods ticking in the dark, the slow unraveling of a jelly's bell, the ribbon swim of a fish that looks like a question mark answering itself. Each is an argument for gentleness. Each is a reminder that wonder is a kind of rest. Thank you for coming all the way down with me. If you'd like to keep drifting through quiet, curious science stories like this tide pools of Mars, forests of microbe cities, starlight measured in seasons, you're warmly invited to stay with Hypnosphere. Subscribing is like leaving a small light on in the hallway, a comfort you can return to, a signal that there's more to explore slowly together.